everyone, my name is Hope and welcome back to my channel. I like musicals, they're a part of my life, and today we're going to be talking about the Wicked movie. I'm going to give you my full and comprehensive review because everyone's on the Wicked train recently and I'm also getting on the train. So sorry it's 2 weeks in a row about Wicked, but it just needs to be done. It just needs to be done and I'm sorry about that. So yes, this will be my full comprehensive review on everything. I'm going to attempt to read these notes which I made in the dark and clearly are not overly legible. And we're going to have a good time, you know. But before we get into this video, remember that you can like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. And let me know your thoughts on the Wicked movie down below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? I personally quite liked it, but I know a few people have just been a bit like controversial in not liking it. So let me know down below either way. Remember that you can also follow me on my social medias, which is XonWilson, X on Instagram, and HopeWilson45 on Twitter and TikTok. And I think that's everything I have to say other than get ready for some spoilers. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, the Wicked movie. I very much enjoyed the Wicked movie. I didn't really see anything overly wrong with it, but I felt like it was missing an edge. And I don't quite know what that was. I don't know whether if it was because it was one part of a two-part film or that it was just missing something from me personally. But that was my only drawback to the movie. Now, I wasn't quite sure what to talk about order-wise, but I feel like most people are going to want to hear about performances first. So I thought that's what I should start with. So, Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba. Now, I thought she was very strong. I preferred her to Ariana Grande, but also I generally prefer the character of Elphaba to Glinda, so that may have contributed to it. Obviously, I never had any doubt that Cynthia Erivo's voice was going to be amazing, and it was. Her Defying Gravity is probably one of my favourite Defying Gravities of all time, apart from that one added section which I thought was really unnecessary, and if you've seen the film you definitely know what I'm talking about. But I was very happy with her performance. I'd said in a lot of my videos, both on TikTok and on here, that I was worried about her feeling too old because I think Cynthia Erivo is about 36, 37, and obviously Elphaba is supposed to be like 21 to like 26-ish, give or take, in the span of the show. But I really did not feel like that. She definitely felt the right age. She didn't feel too old, and I really did like her performance. The fact that she had prosthetic ears really caught me off guard. I thought that was a really bizarre thing to have a prosthetic of, but honestly, I'm not questioning it. I think my only singing thing was I'm Not That Girl, and not because it was bad. It was beautiful, don't get me wrong, especially with all the staging and in the woods and everything. It was great, but it's just the light limb, that one, because the whole point of the song I'm Not That Girl is its simplicity. It's the whole, like, that song as a whole is supposed to be the simple contrast to The Wizard and I and Defying Gravity and all the belty stuff that she does throughout the first act of the show. I don't think that riff down was overly necessary and kind of defeated the object of the song. And don't get me wrong, it was beautiful. I thought it was so clean and so nice and I loved it. But that was my only qualm with the singing from her, because to me, it just didn't make logical sense with the character and the reason that song is in the show. But anyway, moving on. I thought her acting was great. I thought her Elphaba made a lot of sense, and obviously because they have more time to do it than they do in the show, I felt like her reasonings for a lot of things also made a lot of sense. But overall, I was really happy with her and her performance in the movie. So, Ariana Grande as Glinda. I liked it. I didn't really have any major problems with it. I thought there was a couple of diction things, mainly just in No One Wants the Wicked. But again, it wasn't anything where I was like screaming, crying, throwing up. Like, it was fine. I liked her portrayal of Glinda. I think she was more loyal to the source material. I think both Cynthia and Ariana were both pretty loyal to the original characters of Elphaba and Glinda. But I did feel like Ariana's portrayal of Glinda was a lot less mean than she is in the show. Because in the show, she's just generally a pretty not very nice person until she kind of is. Like, because they don't have that development time that they do in the film. But again, I felt like her portrayal made a lot of sense and it was a good portrayal of Glinda and who she is. And even with her singing, I thought it was generally good across the board. Like I said, there was a couple of diction things, but it was a solid, good performance. I think Popular was fun. I think What Is This Feeling is a great number just in general, but the contrast that you see between the two of them in that number is genuinely great. And I think their friendship also has really bled into the film as a whole, and I think you can see that because they are so close. I think that friendship really tied them together and tied Elphaba and Glinda together in the film, and I thought that was really nice. Fiyero, Jonathan Bailey. Now, I want to preface this by saying this is not an issue. It may sound like it by the way I say it, so I just want to make that clear. I love Jonathan Bailey, and he is great in this. His version of Fiyero is just very, very different from the source material. And I'll say the same thing about Bok when I get there. But Fiyero in his version is way more aware of who he is as a person. In Wicked the musical, Fiyero is a spoiled brat, and he doesn't really know how bad of a person that he is until he meets Elphaba and he goes, oh, like, I'm slowly getting it. In the film, he very much knows how bad of a person he is. He actively does bad things and knows that they're bad, which for me I think kind of contradicts some of the actions that he does in saving like the Lion Cub and stuff. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense with the way that the character is played, and it feels like we kind of have to be told why he does that as opposed to being shown, if that makes sense. But like his voice, his dance ability, his acting, like I think he's great in this film, and he works so well alongside Cynthia and Ariana. Like they work really well as a trio, and when you see them as a trio you're really feeling the different energies between them, which is great. But that was my one thing, is that he's very different from the source material, and I think it makes less sense than it does in the musical. Going on to Bok, I have the same thing, but it's not quite the same. I feel like Bok, just in general, in the film, feels like a really small role in comparison to the musical. Now, he does the same amount in the musical and in the film, but I think because the film is so much longer, it makes Bok feel like a really, really minor character. And because he becomes, I would say, arguably the most prominent side character in the second act, I really thought that was kind of bizarre. I think Ethan Slater plays him as less nervous and more desperate in the film than in the musical. Because in the musical, Bok is very much portrayed as like this innocent guy who, just because he wanted to impress Glinda, kind of got caught up in the wrong ways. In the movie, it's like he's so desperate to be with Glinda, he knowingly does bad things for that reason. And again, I think it just alters the second act and how you view him. And I think actually, to be fair, it will make more sense for his character arc in the second act, because obviously, spoilers for the second Wicked film, he turns into the Tin Man, but he is quite vengeful in the second act, as opposed to in the first, where he's really, really nice and innocent. And I think that arc will actually make more sense with him being so desperate to impress her that the desperation turns to being vengeful, as opposed to him just having that complete arc. I think the only issue that this will pose was that people aren't gonna feel for him when he turns into the Tin Man, because obviously with Nessa they have this whole relationship, and I think it is also underplayed in the musical a little bit, but this sense of like Nessa Rose in the second act, again another spoiler, strips away the rights of Munchkins to keep Bok with her. And I feel like because Bok isn't the most likable character in the first one, that we're not gonna have that same impact that we should in the second one. But like, this is all just speculation, and I feel like I can't really make a whole judgment call on that until the second one comes out and I see how that works. So just take what that I just said with a pinch of salt. But like, his performance worked, like I said. I thought it was a solid performance. It was just that thing, because I know the show so well, set off little alarm bells for further down the line. Nessa Rose. I really liked Marissa Bode in this film. I felt like she worked pretty well. I feel like Nessa as a character, and I was watching a video of her talking about how she thought Nessa was so complex, and I'm 100% on that side. I'm a big Nessa stan, and that sounds really bad to say, because it is. But like, I would love to play Nessa Rose. She's probably like the person I would want to play the most in Wicked. I'd love to play Elphaba or Glinda. I like them both. But Nessa is the one I feel like I relate to the most and understand as a character the most out of all of them. And I felt like it was very clear that she understood where things were going for her character, because Nessa Rose is a pretty terrible sister just in general, but her reasonings make so much sense, like especially when it comes to the second act, and all of these things change for her and her life basically upends and she becomes who she becomes. I feel like all of that is very much set up in this first movie by her, and I know a lot of people don't like her, and that's fine. But honestly, I think she does do some terrible things in the second act, don't get me wrong. But in this first act, I think a lot of her actions have reasons. And I think it's important that people know that, because her performance, I think, perfectly encapsulates the actual real character that Nessa is. Next, Michelle Yeoh. Now, I've heard a lot of people complaining about Michelle Yeoh. I can never say a bad word about this woman. I just can't. I can tell you with absolute certainty that the best shot in the entire film is when Michelle Yeoh turns around. She starts smiling to the camera and all the flying monkeys are behind her. Best shot of the whole film. And when I genuinely tell you, let me find it. I wrote here, boss ass bitch, because that's what she is in that scene. Also, yes, I did write I love Jeff, so don't judge me. But I really like her in this film. Like, her portrayal is arguably the most different from the stage musical, because in the stage musical, Madame Morrible is very eccentric, very actually like drag queen-esque. Michelle Yeoh plays Madame Morrible for seriousness, but it works so well, especially because they go for the more naturalistic portrayal of her. Like, it just works so well, and I think it's great. As I'm saying she can't sing, I thought she was fine, didn't have an issue with it, but I love that woman, so yay for Michelle Yeoh. And I think the last on like my key leads of the show is the wizard, and it was Jeff Goldblum, and like I said, I love Jeff. I'm glad they cut A Sentimental Man short, because genuinely could not sing that song to you if I tried. It's one of my skip songs, and I've just realised I've left off Dr. Dylan, so I'll talk about him in a sec. I feel like the wizard as a character makes more sense in the film than it does in the musical, because in the musical he's very like happy-go-lucky and he seems a bit like clueless and stuff, whereas in the film he's way more in the know about what's going on. And when Alphabet explains that the wizard actually had a lot to do with it, this makes way more sense than it does in the musical, which is nice. The wizard technically only comes into the show in the last 20 odd minutes of it. That is hard to make a judgment call on like how he's going to be for the whole thing, but it's Jeff Goldblum, and I just think that is such a good choice for the wizard. I was literally sat there thinking about it, and I was like, there is genuinely only one other person in the entire world I could ever see playing the wizard other than Jeff Goldblum, and that is Willem Dafoe, and I'm gonna down that hill. So yeah. But last, my actual last, Dr. Dillamond, Peter Dinklage. It does not sound like Peter Dinklage. I can't exactly remember what Peter Dinklage sounds like, but that was not it. I mean, obviously he is playing a goat, so he sounds more like a goat than he does in real life. But yeah, I think the character worked. I think him being a physical goat isn't my favourite. Like, it's fine and it works and it makes sense, but I think I'd really like him as some anthropomorphic goat like he is in the musical, because I just think it humanises him a bit more, because I think people can sympathise with a man that looks like a goat more than they can an actual goat. And I'm not saying what happens to him in the film is right, because it's not. It's actually really, really not. And I'm strongly on that front. But I like Something Bad. He made it more interesting. But again, I'm glad that song was cut short, because that song is just a lot of the same otherwise. So it's nice to have some variety. But they're all my performance notes. I will say that Fanny and Shen Shen, stars of that film, for real. Like, all of those lines were just great. Every time I saw them on screen, I was like, something funny is about to happen. And it was great. But let's talk more general about production and story and stuff now. So, choreography, great, no complaints from me, and I think everyone will agree, because it's literally spiraling around TikTok at the moment. The amount of what is this feeling choreography I've seen spinning around is truly crazy. Dancing Through Life has started now. I'm just waiting for the rest of it. The whole movie's just going to be on TikTok by the end of December. But yes, choreography was great. Singing, also great. Bit quiet, but again, don't think that is the film's problem. Visually, I thought, like, costumes, amazing. Madame Marible's costumes, yes please, like, looks so great. And again, a lot of the wigs as well, also amazing, because I feel like they never get a mention. Visually, like, lighting design wise, it was good for like 85% of it. It was just that like 15% where they just changed the colours from this like bright Technicolor to this like dulled out version of the Technicolor, and I just thought it was really bizarre as a choice. Like, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me, and it felt like some of those scenes were kind of like separate from the rest of the film because the lighting didn't match. Wicked very much sits in its own aesthetic of like dark colours, and it very much feels like Wicked was placed into the scene of Wizard of Oz, which makes sense because it very much sees itself as more of a prequel to the Wizard of Oz than the musical Wicked does. But I'm wondering if that should transfer into the actual production, because I'd love to see how different the vibes would be if Wicked as a show was way brighter, because it is just so dark. And I did think just generally that a lot of the aesthetics that they set up in Wicked the musical were not in Wicked the film. So the Osdurst Ballroom, for example, in the musical, this is like the ultimate Wicked aesthetic, I feel. It's the black and dark green outfits. They're all very like fanciful, like steampunk-esque outfits. And in the film, it's giving Under the Sea vibes. Like, I genuinely wrote Osdurst Ballroom Under the Sea vibes. Like, genuinely wrote that down here. And I don't quite think that worked. I think that one section was actually the only part of the show I thought was too bright. And I think if you didn't know the show, this wouldn't impact you whatsoever. But for me, knowing the show so well, it felt like this is one of the only parts of, like, Oz in general that you get a really good idea of the vibe that it is in the show. And because they changed that so extensively, it really threw me off. Now, I'm guessing this is because Elphaba wears all black, so it makes her stick out from everyone if she's in black and everyone's in bright colours. But I don't know why, that was the only thing that I wanted. I really wanted this like dark looking Osdurst Ballroom because I did feel like it would pay homage to the Wicked musical. One thing I also noticed was Oz in the movie feels way techier than it does in the show. Like, in the show, Oz feels like it's like mobile phone. Like, there's not any like super techy parts except for the wizard, which I think makes sense because he's this like, being who's kind of above everyone else, so he would have the tech and nobody else does. But like the train that they get on in that film, like that is a high-tech train. The bit where I clocked onto it was in Dr. Dillerman's class, where there was like the light opened and then there was this like projector light thing going on. I was like, this is so techy, and for what? I don't remember if there were computers in the library of Shiz University, but if there was, I wouldn't be surprised. That's how I felt. And this wasn't necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, either way, I just noticed it. But I do think the general world building in Wicked is great. I feel like you have a very good idea of what everything looks like, where everything is, the vibes of the different segments of Oz. I feel that was very well set up and I think really engaged you in the environment of Oz. We also got introduced to the Grimmery lore. If you don't remember what the Grimmery is, the Grimmery was like the magical book that Elphaba could read, Madame Orrible could only read a word or two, and the wizard pretended to be able to read but actually couldn't read at all. Fun fact, he actually says Omaha, pretending to read the Grimmery, when that's just actually where he's from, because he's from Omaha, Nebraska. But they set up the Grimmery lore and this like element of prophecy. I don't quite remember what the prophecy was, but it was something to do with the wizard going up in a balloon and there being a wicked witch, which was obviously Elphaba. It made sense, and I know they probably added it in to give it a reason to have a Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel cameo, which was great. Honestly, I was there like, oh yeah, this was needed. I'm glad it's there. But it was nice to have that lore because I don't think that lore is completely fleshed out in the show. So it was nice to have that set out for us. I also wanted to point out these two little continuity things because I noticed them and I don't know if anybody else has, but they've been bothering me. Well, one of them was actually pointed out to me by someone I know, but one of them I very much noticed and couldn't let go of for the entire time I was there. So the first one, which is the one I noticed, was that there is a continuity error between Bock's last name. So Bock introduces himself as Bock Woodsman with an S in there, but when they bring out the list of like room assignments, it's Woodman. I know it's the tiniest thing, but actually it drives me around the bend. I don't know why no one picked up on it. It did, and it annoyed me. Also, apparently when Fiyero is stroking the lion cub, at one point his hand goes through the lion cub, so that was interesting too. Obviously, because the show is longer, they added in more scenes, which I think is nice because I always feel like musicals nowadays focus way more on the songs than on the book, and I think the book is actually more important. But there was only, I think, one scene I felt this is really unnecessary, and it was Elphaba meeting Fiyero for the first time. They meet each other in the woods, and then like in the next scene Glinda meets him for the first time, and I'm pretty sure she meets him before Elphaba does in the show, and it's just the most irrelevant scene. I don't see any point in it whatsoever. I mean, it's only like 30 seconds, so I don't really know why they kept it in there, but I don't know. I just thought that was really random. But I will say I do love all the setups. I think the Poppy setup is cool. I think all the foreshadowing is great. A lot of the foreshadowing is in the musical anyway, and I just think it's one of the best shows in regards to foreshadowing. But I think all the setups and foreshadowing is really, really great and done really well. Especially, I think, if you don't know the show, it's going to be really interesting to go back to watch the first one and be like, oh, that's all the stuff that I missed that was set up for Act 2 that I didn't actually know. I also just think the last 15 minutes of the show in general are pretty damn perfect. I think it's so engaging. I think that it's directed well, it's paced really well. I do genuinely just think those last 15 minutes are pretty uneditable in the sense that, like, I think they are perfect the way that it stands. Like I said, the only thing that bothers me is the end of Defying Gravity. I feel like because that lead up is so long, that extra like 30 seconds where she goes into the sky, I just think is really unnecessary. We're just ready for that big ending, so we don't need that added in. But apart from that, I genuinely thought that last 15 minutes was perfect. And just as a whole, I just thought the film was really, really strong. I think it's just set up so solid, it was directed so solid, it looked great. Like, I think for what everyone wanted, it was what we were given. I think everyone really knew what they were going for and they really hit that target. And I'm really grateful for that, because while movie musicals are scary because it leans way more into the fact that you can just make a musical movie and make way more money than you can with actual theatre, I think this movie will genuinely interest more people into going and watching more theatre because they go, oh, I like this, let's go and see it in a live perspective. And I think especially because this Wicked movie realistically has been a very long time coming. The show is actually the same age as I am. Like, I think the show premiered about 3 days before I was born, which is kind of crazy. So I think because we've all been waiting for it for so long, and because we've known about the show and the show's been marketed for so long before it's actually come out, that everyone was just ready for a great film, and I really feel like they delivered on that front. So if you haven't seen it and you've just watched that whole ass review, go and watch it, because it is actually really good, and I think it's really worth seeing. Even if you're not really into like musical films, I feel like you'll enjoy it because the general consensus has just generally been great. But I think that's all I have to say. Let me know what your thoughts on Wicked are down below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you controversial in that way? Either way, let me know. Remember that you can like, comment, subscribe, do all those fun things. Follow me on all my social medias, and I will see you in the next one.